You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 561, Fairhaven.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I am Charlene Schmidt, keeping the seat warm in for Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we drop by the pub, we meet the locals, and we see if there's any morals, meanings, and messages to be gained from chatting about an episode of Star Trek. Then we ask if the whole thing stands the test of time.
This week, Fairhaven, the one where the Voyager crew spends some extended time on the backlot, and Janeway can't help falling in love with a photonic figment of her fantasies. Welcome back to the show, Char. I'm glad you're here.
Hey, thanks so much for having me back. This is a blast and an honor and a pleasure as always.
Now, of course, for anybody who needs a reminder, you have your own experience with podcasting about Voyager, right?
Sure. Yes, I did 190 episodes of To the Journey a little, around 10 years ago now.
Nice.
It's crazy to think that, but about this time this year, I was doing that show. And yeah, the Mission Loggers probably know me now from Mission Log Prodigy that I'm doing with Marina Kravchuk, and we had an absolute blast covering Season 2.
I'm so glad. And, of course, a lot of DNA shared between Voyager and Prodigy, so that is a
Very
perfect
much.
fit. Yes, yeah. Excellent. Well, I'm so glad that you're back for this as we dig into Fairhaven. If you don't mind, tell people where they can find us.
Yes, of course, because we would love to hear from you. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and Threads at Roddenberry Podcasts. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord with near-daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics you love. So many topics in there, oh my gosh. Get your invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. And while you're at it, one of the most important ways to help the podcast you love is to leave a 5-star rating and a review at Apple or whatever your favorite podcast platform is. And of course, always remember your comments could be used on the show. And now, here is John Champion, who stayed up all night in the pub just to draft up this week's trivia. You weren't hanging out in the mess hall with Neelix?
I've had about enough of Neelix talking about his blood pudding, and although I do like creamed cabbage, so, I think I'd go for a nice hollow pint at some point.
Okay.
All right. Fairhaven was written by Robin Berger, and she gets the sole credit here, so story and teleplay presumably. But this is not a person who is new to Star Trek. In fact, under the name Robin Bernheim, she co-wrote the TNG episode The Haunted, but this time she had joined the staff of Voyager. So she had been on basically when we lost Lisa Klink. When she stepped away from the show, Robin came on and became a part of the staff. And this is the first of 3 credits on Voyager for Robin, meaning her name in the credits. Doesn't mean that she only contributed to those 3 episodes. She is part of the staff at this point. It was directed by Alan Croker, and of course, Alan is a longtime contributor to Trek, having directed multiple DS9 episodes. Within Voyager, the most recent of his that we discussed was Juggernaut. We've got 6 more of his to go before he jumps over to Enterprise for an even dozen. Now, I love the bit of trivia that there were other locations that were considered by the writing staff in order to shape this story. So get this. This story could have taken place in a castle, I think a haunted castle, actually.
A haunted castle?
A studio.
Okay.
Yeah. A studio lot. An aircraft carrier. There was talk about doing an Agatha Christie style, I don't know, like Murder on the Orient Express, something like that. So
yeah, that's been discussed many years prior
times,
on Voyager as like a Janeway holonovel thing.
Yes, yeah. So it was one of those times where the writers, Brian Fuller was one who shared that, saying that, we kicked around all these ideas. So it really is just picking one of those options to have our characters anywhere that you can get them and then form this relationship for Janeway. So that really is the point. But just think it could have been anywhere, right? But
tell me more about the haunted castle.
I know you want that, Brian. Get in here. But indeed, we end up in a 19th century Irish town, and I love the continued use of the European street on the Universal Studios backlot. It is still there. It looks exactly the same. That space, I mean, it has looked the same for decades, except for maybe changing the paint scheme, you know, the colors on the buildings and the signage, in this case, making it look like a little Irish town. But it's great. If you take the tram tour, you get to drive right through that street. Now, let's meet our guest stars, a few of the townsfolk who make up Fairhaven. There's Jan Clare. She plays Franny Sullivan. Well, up until the point that she's deleted anyway. Jan's credits are somewhat limited to a handful of TV guest roles, including shows like Third Rock from the Sun and The King of Queens in 2002, which is the last of her professional on-screen roles. Harry has his eye on Maggie, who is played by Henriette Ivanens. Henriette has been dropping into feature film and TV guest roles since the early 90s, but it's also worth pointing out that she has a background in live theater and she's a professional makeup artist. According to her site, she will apparently also interrupt you mid-conversation if she sees a dog. Now, this is Henriette's only Trek appearance. Richard Reel plays Seamus, and he probably looks very familiar, not just because he is a prolific character actor, but also because we have seen him before on Star Trek. Go back to TNG, and you will see him as B'Etai, the council leader, in the seminal episode The Inner Light. Now, Richard, get this, he has over 400 credits as an actor. Yeah. And we are still not done with him because he will be back for an episode of Enterprise. And finally, the man of the hour, Michael Sullivan, is played by Fenton McKeown. And if the name isn't already a tip-off to add authenticity to today's episode, yes, Fenton is Irish, and he accumulated a large body of work while working in the UK since the 1980s. In addition to stage work and numerous UK film and TV productions, Fenton also appeared in a recurring role on Game of Thrones, and you may have caught his voice in a number of video games, and not to spoil too much, but we will see him again on Voyager.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant. Even out here, someone is probably wearing a Kiss Me, I'm Irish t-shirt.
Prologue. Tom has whipped up a new holodeck program, a charming 19th century Irish village called Fairhaven, designed as a perfect getaway for the crew. It's got everything: steam trains, colorful locals, a guy who wants money from Tom, hats. Harry is smitten with Maggie O'Halloran until Tom pulls him aside, warning about her betrothed. The Doctor has completely bought into his role as the town priest, arriving on a bicycle, reminding everyone to attend Mass. The place and the people are sunny and cheerful, a welcome escape from the Delta Quadrant grind. Act 1. Fairhaven is happening. Everyone is at the pub cheering on Harry and local strong guy Liam in an arm wrestling match. Tom eggs him on, even swaying the Doctor's bet. Captain Janeway strolls in, charmed by the place and its backwards sign, before alerting the crew about a looming problem, a neutronic wavefront in Voyager's path. In astrometrics, 7 confirms that they'll encounter the storm in 15 hours. With no way to avoid it, Janeway orders preparations to ride it out using an inverse warp field, and as an added precaution, anti-radiation inoculations for the crew. Later, Neelix suggests keeping the Fairhaven program running 24/7 to boost morale during the storm. Janeway agrees, and she heads back to the holodeck herself, where she chats with bartender Michael Sullivan over tea and a game of rings. She's ready to call it a night, but he insists it's only polite to stay. Act 2. Janeway spends the entire night in Fairhaven hanging out with Michael Sullivan, playing rings, arm wrestling, chatting, and enjoying his company, until Michael's wife drops in, steering his attention back to her. Janeway swings by sickbay to get her inoculation, and she grants Tom permission to expand the simulation to Holodeck 2, ensuring Fairhaven stays open for the entire crew during the storm. The Doctor is excited at the prospect of more appearances as the priest, until Tom threatens to send him away on a retreat with a vow of silence. As the neutronic wavefront hits, Voyager sustains minor damage but emerges into an area of relative quiet. In her personal log, Janeway reflects on Michael Sullivan, admitting he's charming, despite being a hologram, but he's not exactly her type. Feeling a little creative, she tweaks his personality, intellect, and even his height, and she deletes his wife. Now he's much more to her liking. Act 3. In the mess hall, Tuvok tells Seven about his definitely not space sickness bout, while Paris and Kim debate updates to the Fairhaven program. Neelix recites menu options for a traditional meal at the Ox and Lamb, and it's more than Tuvok can handle. Discussions of blood pudding and the like. He heads to sickbay. Janeway, in period-appropriate attire now, returns to Fairhaven and encounters the upgraded version of Michael Sullivan, now reading poetry at the train station. They hit it off immediately, since he's got all the charm and curiosity she requested. When the topic of travel comes up, she suggests a trip to Castle O'Dell, the one place she hasn't been. As they chat along the way, Michael asks Katie now, whether she's got a man at home, right as Chakotay walks in. Getting a sense of what's going on, he discreetly retreats to meet Neelix at the Ox and Lamb. Never mind, he called her Captain. Later on the bridge and back in uniform, Chakotay teases Janeway about her interest in Irish culture, amused by her modifications to Sullivan, his height change, etc. Janeway smiles but downplays it, reminding him that Sullivan is just a hologram, though Chakotay seems glad to see her having some fun. So later still, it's back to Fairhaven. Katie gets swept up in dancing at the pub with Michael and the rest of the citizens of the town. Breathless and caught in the moment, she tells the computer to clear everyone but Michael. Alone, they share a kiss, and Katie realizes just how much she enjoys her creation. Act 4. In her quarters, Janeway recycles her Irish literature in the replicator, signaling a need to step back from Fairhaven. When Neelix invites her to an event, she declines, choosing to stay grounded in reality, at least for now. In the holoprogram, Neelix temporarily takes over as bartender while Michael is brooding in a corner. Tom and the Doctor notice something different as Michael reveals his heartache over Katie O'Clair, who disappeared without explanation. Michael, suspecting Tom knows more than he's letting on, accuses him and starts a fight. Cue the full-on brawl, leaving the Doctor, still in his priestly role, to ineffectively play peacemaker. Back to Voyager's sickbay a little while later, he's left to patch up the bruised crew members. The holograms will be fine. When Janeway arrives in sickbay, the conversation ever so uncomfortably returns to Michael. The Doctor pulls Janeway aside for a stroll in the corridor and a candid chat about relationships and holograms. The Doctor suggests that Janeway's feelings are the genuine article, regardless if Michael Sullivan is made of photons or flesh. Janeway hesitates, but pretty much admits to herself that she's fallen for a hologram. But she also admits that she's been tweaking that program all along to make him more perfect, like eliminating his snoring. The Doctor asks, what does it matter if he's a hologram? If Janeway embraces his flaws instead of rewriting them, she might find a connection that feels authentic, even in the Delta Quadrant. Act 5. Voyager passes through the roughest part of the neutronic wavefront. Shields diminish and the ship is dragged along the wave. Chakotay suggests rerouting all available power to the deflector emitters, even if it means shutting down the holodeck without a proper sequence. Janeway gives the order, and it works. The deflector dissipates the wave's energy, and Voyager makes it to the quiet of space just as the shields reach the breaking point. Out of danger, Tom surveys the damage to Fairhaven. Most of the program is intact, but a lot of the details are irretrievable. Knowing how much it means to the captain, Tom defers to her on what parts to save. Janeway's preference is clear. She goes to the holodeck and activates the character of Michael Sullivan on his own. And Janeway plays it a bit distant at first, saying that she doesn't think she'll be able to come around again. He presses her for a reason which she can't really give, and then Michael says that he loves her. That seems to give her second thoughts about passing through, and they share a kiss before Janeway ends the program with one final command, locking herself out of his behavioral subroutines to prevent further modifications. Save program, the end.
Excellent recap as always, John. Mad respect for those recaps now, having done some of those for Mission Log Prodigy.
You are a pro. You know how to make the sausage.
You know how to make it look easy, sir. I will say that.
No. All right. Well, look, let's get into it here with Fairhaven. I am immediately from the first frame that we see, I am drawn in by old steam trains and quaint European towns. So they're pandering to the John Champion demo at least a little with this one. Yeah.
I had a feeling you were going to appreciate this.
Yeah.
What I appreciate is how Tom Paris is a really busy guy. Apparently, when he's not busy working on a new ship or fixing cars in his garage, he's still working on new holonovels, as well as his shifts on the bridge and in sickbay. He's a busy guy.
He's very busy, but, first of all, I do question how deeply his historical interests run, because they are kind of all over the place. Like, if it's older than 200 years old, he knows all about it. But also, I question, really, how hard is it to make a holonovel? Because if I learned anything from TNG, you can just walk up to a panel and say, computer, make it New York, 1936, and then boom, it just happens. So I'm not totally convinced that it's that much hard work.
I mean,
right?
He did put in the harp backward, so...
He did. Oh,
I don't know.
Such a dumb oversight. Right away in the teaser segment, I love the Doctor as the priest because I felt like that was kind of perfect. But then we circle back to that later and he explains it. But the first time I watched it, I thought, oh, this is inspired. Oh, wait, he's explaining it.
Did that ruin it?
Yeah, I kind of did. Yeah.
It's funny. I had a similar thought. That's a perfect role. You know how, like in Sandrines, when that was the holo program of choice, he was the bartender, and I thought that didn't really work for him. But the priest, you're barking up the right tree there.
Yeah.
I have to make a note about how Harry casually mentions he could alter Maggie O'Halloran's sister so she doesn't have wooden teeth. And then Tom says in return, no, I'm not changing a thing, which is hilarious given what Janeway does later.
I know.
Foreshadowing.
No,
I
Harry.
like it.
No, Harry, you can't do that. The captain can, but you can't.
Well, you're just an ensign, Harry. Stay in your lane.
Just want to change your teeth. That's all.
Just the teeth.
I do wonder, is it part of the holodeck programming to know to lose at arm wrestling or maybe other feats of strength? It's like, no, we're playing against the crew. You got to let them win every now and then.
I do wonder, because there is no way Harry could really beat this guy.
No, absolutely not.
No, sheer brute force against Harry Kim, who is a fine human specimen, but does not have that kind of musculature in his arms. Sorry.
No, not at all. You mentioned the backwards harp sign.
Yeah.
Okay, and I wondered for a moment, was this a contrivance to show specifically what the holodeck gets wrong, or what Tom gets wrong, or was this more like a happy accident? Like, this was written in because they got a sign from the prop department that was backwards?
Ooh.
Or are we just trying to say, no, Janeway really is this much of an aficionado? It's a simple choice like that makes me wonder so many things.
Right, what really happened here? I would love to think that maybe it is that they got the prop, but it's not perfect. But you know what? We can work with this. We'll write it into the show. We'll make Tom look like a little bit of a dummy because he got it wrong. And then Janeway's going to look really smart because she knows it's backward.
Right.
So it's doing a lot of work here.
It is. And it would have to be a really specific script thing. Like, okay, we need a sign that is an Irish harp sign you would see in a pub, but it needs to be backwards because it totally has to sell this little subplot here about either Tom or the holodeck getting it wrong and Janeway getting it right.
Yeah, no, I think this was a prop. That's a great story. Let's do that.
I think that's better. All right. Yeah.
Speaking of things that I love, the term wavefront for bad weather,
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds great. That sounds just descriptive enough to let people know, you know what? It's kind of lousy outside. How about we stay in? Let's adopt this.
I love that. Let's do it. Let's do it. I still wonder why Seven feels a need to blurt out Borg classifications of things, whether it's a phenomenon or an alien species. Like somebody else in the crew is going to go like, oh, yeah, of course.
Right, because
like, no,
they're so familiar with those terms.
Yeah, it has no meaning to them at all. She's just showing off like, yeah, we saw that. It's like, it has such a low number. We've seen it forever ago.
That's exactly what that is.
Yeah.
Yes. An observation about Janeway's drinking habits. We know that Janeway drinks black coffee, but she apparently takes cream in her tea, which I consider to be a weaker drink.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Agreed. I don't like cream in my tea. Sorry.
Like,
Sorry,
why?
UK.
Why dilute
Come
it
at me.
more? Huh?
Yeah, I don't need that. Don't need that in my life. That is a really quick change as we get to the end of that interaction between Janeway's no thanks to, oh yeah, I'm staying, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Like that whole just one game, that strategy has never worked for anyone ever.
You were mentioning the wavefront. I really like the effects of that. I think it's a nice looking cloudy thing. Look, it is space. You wonder why can't they just go around it? But okay, we'll give it to them for the show. They
have to
do
yeah.
that. And it's a fun sequence to see Janeway play holodeck programmer. I get the idea, okay, yeah, increase in education, a few physical tweaks, and I kept thinking, like, is this a reverse weird science thing? You know? Is Janeway making her perfect mate, you know? Star Trek will play fast and loose with how easy or how complicated it is to change something in the holodeck. Like I said before, you could just say, make this, and the computer will do it. But in this case, saying, make his personality more complicated, that works. Like, the computer understands what that is, and that just seems like a recipe for the computer to really mess things up, you know?
Well, thank goodness the computer actually asks, hey, specify how this time around, just because we have seen this go wrong so many times. However, there's 3 little damning words that this is, I think, why Norm nominated me to do this episode, and those words are delete the wife.
Oh my goodness.
This is the moment that takes me out of this episode.
Yeah? It took that. That was it.
Yep. Put a pin in it. Let's discuss much later.
I cannot wait. Can't wait. I love the bit with setting off Tuvok's very sensitive condition. Like, all of that is so good.
So, yeah, Tim Gruss doesn't get a ton to do in this episode, but he definitely has that look of, say, when somebody's talking about really elaborate food and scents to somebody who has a bad hangover. He did that to perfection. It made me wonder, do Vulcans puke? Because had Tuvok not excused himself, I think we might have found out.
I think you're right. Yeah. There's something interesting about when Janeway goes back into Fairhaven and she meets the newly reprogrammed Michael Sullivan, that she doesn't know the poets that he's describing. And that was interesting to me because I wondered if, you know, part of the desire, it wasn't just like, oh, I want him to be smarter so we can talk about things, but part of that desire was somebody who could match her interests and she could also learn something from them. Like, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
The computer would go like, oh, okay, we're going to make it more complicated. You already said that you wanted to talk about poetry and you're naming off these people that he doesn't know about. Now we're going to turn the tables on you and maybe you'll get something out of it too.
Right. This really doesn't come as a big surprise. Janeway loves a challenge. She kind of has to do everything on hard mode, and maybe to an extent, and I'll argue against my own point here, but maybe also in relationships, where she likes to be challenged, though, is where the point applies. Yeah. And, hey, props to Chakotay for reading the situation and not crashing Janeway's castle date, and for having the guts to confront her about her noticeable embarrassment later. Good job, Chakotay, in this episode.
Okay, nicely done, but there is a thread left dangling here about Chakotay. Janeway says, too bad he's made of photons and force fields. And Chakotay says, I never let that stand in my way. So, what is Chakotay up to on the holodeck?
I think he just told us.
Okay.
Like, hey, you know what? Okay, let's talk about this for a second. on one hand, this is great. This is sex positive.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Janeway, by all means, indulge. No shame. But then on the other hand, okay, think about this. They are discussing this a little hushed, but also still openly on the bridge. And so they could have maybe taken the convo to the ready room. Like, I understand that's not logistically great for the scene, but in real life, maybe something of a more personal nature, like, hey, maybe we ought to, can I see you in the ready room for just a second? Yes, that would have been inconvenient storytelling-wise, but given Janeway's embarrassment about the topic, I'm almost a little surprised that it didn't happen there. Yeah. If I were an unnamed officer working bridge duty that day and I just happened to overhear a smidge of this conversation, I might come to the conclusion that there's some details about my commanding officers I'd rather not know.
Yeah.
That thought occurred to me while I looked at the background actors just hanging out there. Like, how much did they get to hear this?
Sure.
Well, and also, okay, in your recap, you mentioned Chakotay more or less giving his blessing to this whole thing. And is it any coincidence that once Chakotay does so, Janeway lets herself indulge?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, he does. Of course, you have to have the follow-up conversation with the doctor. She needs to get this reinforcement. And it's interesting. Maybe we'll get into this in our deeper discussion here. Is the reinforcement because the captain doesn't feel like she can have a relationship on board? Or is it because of the kind of barrier with a manufactured character, a manufactured intelligence? All of those are very much open for debate, but regardless, she's got at least those two tracks to think about when she's deciding whether or not to pursue this. I really like these moments with Janeway and Chakotay, though, because it is a personal connection. JC shipping or not, it is at least a moment that they get to have together that is personal, that is not her just like, defying him pushing back on an order or whatever, something like that feels very contrived. This felt genuine.
Absolutely. They're talking person to person, not commanding officer to subordinate or anything like that. They're not talking about ship stuff. They're talking about life stuff, which is nice. Yeah. And also, anytime somebody says, I have an interest in, that's anybody with any newfound interest due to a crush. Am I right?
Right. Yep. Yeah, we're on to you. Yeah.
So I have a question. Even though the ship runs on a 24-hour rotation, and no doubt people would be coming and going at all hours due to that with the open door policy for Fairhaven, apparently nobody else is using the program, ? When Janeway deletes the other characters so she can kiss Michael privately.
Right.
The question I have is, did she decide to just lock the door behind her and leave everybody else out so she could have her moment?
Oh my gosh. Wow. Captain's prerogative, right? I guess. Yeah. Oh, I didn't think about that. Now, I did think about her recycling her, well, quote-unquote antique books. These are the things that I guess got replicated in Fairhaven, in the holodeck simulation. That's one of those props you can take out with you because it got replicated as opposed to just an image of that thing. I mean, does it take up too much space in your room or your heart in this case? Because it takes energy to break them down anyway.
Yes, but doesn't the replicator also reclaim some of the energy that it took to make it in the first place? Like, remember in Year of Hell where Janeway tells Chakotay to recycle the watch because they needed the energy? So we don't know the complete breakdown of that, but that's a good question.
I guess. I mean, it's like, okay, in that case, it was a watch. Now they got turned into books, and tomorrow they're going to get turned into, ox blood for Neelix to make a dish out of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Now, we do finally get to see 7 of 9 in the simulation, and I just love her nonchalant superiority about all things. Just ring toss, this is stupid, and I can do it better than you. Right. It's great. Now, no safety protocols, I guess, for a bar fight in the holodeck. And also, Tom, he made it. Can he just turn it off?
Right? Okay, I had the same question here. Since when are the safeties off in the holodeck and a bar fight sends you to sickbay? Huh?
Yeah, I know. Because he could just say stop. Yeah, this isn't one of those like holodeck gone crazy episodes where you can't stop it and the protocols are off or any of that.
Not this time.
No. I like the extended walk and talk with the Doctor and Janeway. It's a good scene anyway, but we really get to make use of these corridor sets, and it's just nice. I mean, sometimes a simple thing like that can be really good.
Yeah.
Also, of course, we have to make a big deal about shutting down that system in order to get through the wave front. But honestly, it should be way easier to shut down a non-essential system and then just move that to the deflector power or whatever you need. And if it's a computer program like the holodeck, just reboot it. Like, I'm not going to do it right now, but I could just reach over and hit the power button on my computer, and it would come back fine. You and I would have to reconnect, but it would be fine.
Yeah, I don't know. I was a little perplexed and a little bit eye-rolly about this whole thing, because hasn't holodeck energy never had the capability of being rerouted anywhere else on the ship? And then, now it can with a little bit of rerouting? Mm-hmm. What?
They
Since
made a big
when?
deal out of that
Please
before.
make this make sense.
Yep. I do have to say, at the very end, this is some serious stuff for Janeway to kind of be reflective about her feelings and all that. And I would say that, she's taking her relationship with holodeck Michael very seriously. It at least as seriously as she took violating all of her sense of ethics and principles while chasing down Captain Ransom.
I am assuming that Neelix never submitted his recipes to the Pathfinder project, for reasons of good taste.
All right, Char, I don't want to tease it anymore because I feel like you have feelings about this episode. maybe in the same way that Janeway has feelings about Michael Sullivan. Not saying that they're the same kind of feeling. I'm just saying that they're strong feelings.
Okay, there's feelings. I'm feeling feelings. I might have different feelings than what Janeway is feeling. Particularly, how about we start things off just by talking about Fairhaven, the program?
Sure.
Because this is yet another iteration of like a place for the crew to go and hang out and do things. We've seen a few things now. We saw Chez Sandrines. We saw Club Bro Med. Janeway had her Da Vinci program for a little while. She had her just stupid holo novel mystery with the bratty kids in their Latin.
Oh my god, that one was so bad.
And now we have Fairhaven. Oh, and also Captain Proton. What am I thinking? As far as the holodeck programs go, this one just feels like a more detailed version of Sandrines, where the end goal is basically the same. You come in, get some drinks, you hang out, just a little more attention to detail, maybe. We kind of poked fun at Tom for getting the harp wrong. So, it's just different stuff. Instead of playing pool, you have games of rings, you're dancing to live music. If that's appealing, great. And I can see how that would appeal to a 24th century crew. They're constantly using technology. They're out in space, and there's touchscreens, whereas this is a very much more tactile, almost like Luddite kind of a lifestyle. And so it's exciting and different for them. And at the same time, I feel like this program will tire. People will get tired of it very quickly and move on to whatever's next, because I'm sorry, I think that Fairhaven's earth tone heavy color palette, it's very blah to the eye. It's not very vibrant. I feel like even Sandrines had a little more going on for it color palette wise.
Yeah.
And the soundtrack does a lot of heavy lifting here. It's like My Irish People intensifies with the music cues.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned it in the trivia. We're on that street at Universal.
Yeah.
And it is designed to be just generically European. You could make it look older. You could make it look a little fresher. You could make it look more exciting. You could make it look kind of dreary. But it's up to the production designer to come in and say, okay, new coat of paint, add flowers, add this, take away this, and really dress it up. And of course, the music, like you said, a lot of heavy lifting there. I absolutely get the idea. So imagine that you live in the 24th century. Technology is all around you all the time. So the idea of entertainment, the idea of escape is probably going to look very different than it maybe does now, or even maybe not that different now. I mean, I talk about going to theme parks, and part of the thing, you go to Disneyland, and what are you doing? You're stepping into lands that look like a fantasy world, that look like the Old West, that look like sort of a jungle out of the 1930s, out of a movie from the 1930s, something like that. Yeah, there's the Tomorrowland aspect, but it's also fantastical. It's not literal, obviously. So I get this idea that you want to create different places. I also think that Star Trek tends to struggle with what that will be, because it's got to be generic enough for television. It's got to be generic enough for our characters. And it's not until really Star Trek of the current era, since like 2017, that we've leaned into the idea of people just hanging out in bars all the time. Like, yeah, we had 10 Forward, but even then that was very like sedate.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I agree. That's where you go to get dinner and a drink. Kind of like the mess hall on Voyager. Whereas here, you can get into costume if you want, or what have you, and just be somewhere else for a little while. A little bit of escapism.
Yeah, and I get that. Like, I was just talking, I think I was talking to Norman about this. You know, what do you do with James Bond next? Well, we've already had all of this late 20th century Bond and into 21st century Bond. Maybe you got to take him back to the middle of the last century again to make him relevant, because you take away the trappings of technology that we have now, and that increases the fun of it, the opportunity for discovery and excitement for things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to, just whip out a phone, or in their case a tricorder or whatever, and figure it out.
Yeah, solid point. Maybe that was the appeal of Captain Proton too, is just maybe the very classic appeal of those goofy looking dials and props and stuff like that. Whereas like here,
it's all
it feels
analog,
like
and none of it works.
It's really toned down here, and I'm sorry, but it really does feel like they're on a back lot. Like, you can tell it's your standard issue.
100%. But maybe that's what a holodeck feels like. You know,
Maybe
you're there and you're just gonna.
That's fair.
Wow, I really have to suspend my own disbelief, because I walk behind that wall and it's just a flat. You know.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. Well, let's get into the heart here of what Janeway is doing, and there's this just such an interesting conceit about her programming a man to be the perfect lover, the perfect mate, the perfect foil, all these aspects that he brings to her. That's what the holodeck is for, and you could make that as maybe as squeaky clean as you want, or not so much. I refer you back to that conversation, with Chakotay saying he never let that get in his way. Maybe he means just sort of escaping into the fantasy, just sort of accepting the reality of that experience. Or maybe he means like falling in love with a character and having some sort of quote unquote relationship with that character.
I mean, look, we know that it happens. People do it.
Sure. Oh, yeah. I mean, we got a big taste of that in DS9, because they didn't have to wink too much to let you know what was going on in those holosuites at Quarks, So is it somehow better if he, Michael Sullivan, or the whole thing is not quite perfect, because then it's easier to dissociate yourself from it? Janeway, what does she do? She walks in, the harp is backwards, this is fake. Good job, but not good enough, right? So is that something that we want and need from our entertainment? Or does it just show that literally, like, anybody, even our beloved scientifically minded captain, can be taken in, can be fooled by the fantasy if it's good and if you allow yourself to be fooled? Or that anybody and everybody is ready for that perfect situation, that perfect mate? Not be confused with the TNG episode, The Perfect Mate. If it's just there in front of you, if it prevents itself. I keep trying to ask myself, sort of in Janeway's shoes, like, what's wrong with this? And is there anything wrong with this?
Good questions. Generally speaking, I would say no, absolutely not. And especially with Voyager's situation, look, these are human beings, there's needs, and there's only so much fulfillment you might get out of duty and your hobbies and what have you. If you need a little escapism, if you need a little romance, if you need a little more. I'm trying so hard to keep this clean.
Everybody understands.
Read between the lines. That is part of what the holodeck is for, and we all know that. But this is Janeway we're talking about here, and this episode really is an interesting peek into something that I wished Voyager would have gotten into a whole lot more, which is the topic of Janeway's loneliness. They touched on it occasionally in seasons 1 and 2, and then we had Voyager kind of coming together as a family in seasons 3 and 4, and now they've been out there for a while. And it's been a while. And, I think they bring it up so subtly, like with the Doctor, where, look, she can't fraternize with her subordinates. Picard tried with Lieutenant Darren in TNG, and that ended up maybe as like a cautionary tale of why you don't do that. There's also a great short story called Isabeau's Shirt by Kirsten Beyer as to why, the reason why Janeway and Chakotay really didn't get together, which honestly I feel like should have been in the show because they flirted with that idea so much, right? Especially in season 3. And then it just sort of trickles down to a stop. And now they're just sort of like mom and pop minding the store and the kids are, And a lot of the story had to do with the fact that, look, she is in command of the ship, and there may be a day when she's got to send him on a mission that leads to certain death. Could she handle that and love him at the same time? And so she makes that, she draws that line, and she just can't do it. And then also, she's not hopping from planet to planet and kissing the alien of the week a la Kirk. So what are her choices here, really?
This is such a fascinating idea about the trade-off. The trade-off is, I can't compromise my ability to command, can't compromise my duty, which is to, as you just stated, potentially send somebody off on a mission where they get killed, right? That's also partly the reality of a relationship. There are things that are out of your control that you can't trust to be the same from day to day. That things happen, right? But is it healthier? Is it smarter? Is it a viable option? Healthier or smarter may not be the best choice of words. Is it a viable option to decide, well, I'll allow myself this other thing, which is a manufactured intelligence, a thing that I program on a holodeck that I can actually feel real feelings for and allow myself to escape into this. But here's the downside. That person can't actually surprise me, can't actually grow in really profound human ways. Yes, the computer is very smart, and yes, the Doctor has grown and evolved in many ways over the last 6 or 7, years, right? But then that person will never grow old. That person will never change unless you program it to change.
Right.
So there is a big trade-off there. And I think about, this sort of goes into a different area of conversation, but I think about the holodeck in the same way that we have a certain understanding about how we consume media. A video game is very often an outlet for these sort of extreme experiences. If you're in a game that's like a first-person shooter or a car chase game, you're not actually getting in your real car and driving down the streets at 90 miles an hour and knocking people off the road.
Hopefully,
but in the context of the but in the context of the game, that's okay.
Right.
In the context of the game, you're sort of getting that out vicariously, right?
Right.
Or sitting in a movie theater. You watch a movie and you have an emotional connection. You laugh at the funny parts. You cry at the sad parts. You go through the feelings that script and those actors and that director contrived for you to feel. But you also are aware of the fact that you're sitting in a theater, that just the very nature of 24 frames a second causes a little bit of dissociation between you and the media itself. That's why watching a movie looks different from watching the 6 o'clock news on your television.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So there might be some dissociation with the holodeck that you can leave it behind in some respect, even if you allow yourself in the moment to have the real feeling. And I guess what I'm coming back to is, if you can just turn it off and walk away, in the end, is that as emotionally satisfying? Or do you just, as Don Draper said, happiness is the feeling that you have before you need more happiness? You know, is that kind of what happens in the holodeck? I feel that thing. I got that hit. I got that dopamine. I got to spend time with my lover. But then it's easier for me to walk away, but then I can just come right back.
Yeah. Oh, I find the most interesting aspect of this episode, Janeway grappling with her relationship. And I think a lot of it has to do with her disconnect, like you're talking about. And she kind of sets herself up to fail here. Because, like, she tells the doctor, Michael Sullivan is exactly my type. Yes, because you programmed him that way. So...
Yeah.
Like, I think at this point she was maybe just perfecting her fantasy and enjoying the disconnect, but also indulging a little. I feel like Janeway's modifications really cement this relationship's downfall from the moment she opens up his program and makes the modifications. She does what so many people wish they could do in their relationships, which is to change the people that they love, which you cannot do. And I think the cost of that for her is breaking the illusion. The more she dives into it, the more she develops real feelings, but the more that she cannot shake that he isn't real. What a dichotomy, because he is not like the EMH. Michael Sullivan is more of your standard issue hologram. He has not been activated for hours at a time, doesn't have a mobile emitter. He does not struggle with sentience the way the Doctor does. And so I think that does have an aspect of it too. Plus, Janeway's attitude toward holograms is still, you know.
Yeah. She's had to be reminded a few times about the EMH being a being on board. But here's the thing. I want to ask you. Could Michael be those things? Could, you know, because you just described it. Okay, the Doctor's been on. He's been running 24/7 for 6+ years. He has a mobile emitter. So he has this thing that allows him to go outside of sickbay. Could Michael be those things, given enough time, given enough additional technology or whatever we afford him? I mean, is that maybe, like, this is where it gets really interesting, because Janeway has been in denial about the Doctor's sentience, and it, even just very recently, pushed back against his desire to be more, to do better, to be a bigger contributor. But is this the thing that makes you think, like, oh, okay, well, you push back against all the other things, but now you actually had feelings. So now maybe you can't look at a holographic being the same way, because the Doctor does have a point. Granted, it is self-serving.
Oh, very much,
He does have a point. Yeah. Flesh and blood or photons and force fields makes no difference. And if Star Trek is about the diversity of life, what makes Michael any different from the Doctor other than just time and a bit of technology? Would we feel differently about him if we came back in 6 years and he's maybe aware that he is a hologram, the same way that the Doctor is. He is aware that Fairhaven is a construct. He is aware that he's on a ship.
Right.
Now, I've not seen a computer necessarily have an existential crisis other than the EMH, you know, which he did. Right?
Michael Sullivan has a midlife crisis, the sequel.
Yeah. Right. But I wonder, like, are these just barriers that Janeway can't get over or hasn't gotten over yet?
That's a good question. Well, one, could any hologram develop sentience after so many hours of running? Is that possible? Do most run-of-your-mill holograms not get enough of a chance to find out? But then...
And by the way, the answer may just be that it is impossible to know. Therefore, it's one of these Turing test things where you just go like, well, I can't know, so I have to just sort of interact with it as if it does.
Right?
You know?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. You know what really hangs me up in this episode is, you know, Janeway does what she does here, and ultimately the ending is murky. What does Janeway learn from this experience? I ask because she prevents herself from making future changes to Michael's program, but doesn't remove the modifications she had already made. My question to you is, should she have, and would that have driven the moral of the story home more?
Well, I guess we have to figure out what the moral is.
Yes.
Would it have driven the moral home if she had just, like, reset back to zero, back to Tom's original program?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking, is like, should she have taken away her additions that made him so perfect for her? Could she accept him as who he was? Or does that just mean the relationship is over and he's not the right guy? Because this episode suggests that the relationship has future potential, but I'm not so sure about that.
But see, that really is the provocative part of the question here, because if it's about Janeway learning a lesson, well, it's almost like the episode is trying to leave us with this little wink to the audience. Like, I don't know, Janeway knows this isn't really a relationship. She can't really have this, but she's going to keep it kind of in her back pocket just in case the need ever arises, right?
That's a way of looking at it, for sure. It does raise the question, from this experience, does she learn that she does indeed want a relationship, whether it's with Michael Sullivan or somebody else? Does she want romance, or does she just want a sex buddy, or does she want all the above?
Right. Well, and okay, that might be the most interesting question of all, which is really self-reflective about Janeway. Just being able to say, no, here's what I actually need, but here's what I can get in the meantime.
Yeah, true. Or what if she was just really in love with the idea of being in love? Because it had been such a long time, it's like she got drunk off of that excitement.
She hasn't had that. Yeah. She hasn't, and that's a powerful thing. And she hasn't had that because Mark is not there. That's long gone. Yeah. We know that the Chakotay Janeway, has that been resolved from resolutions?
Right.
I think we sort of have to think that it is. They're both professional enough to go like, we can't really do this.
Yeah.
But it's tragic to think that a character or a person, if we were to treat them like real people, just shuts himself off to the possibility of fulfilling that part of their emotional lives because, no, work is the only thing that I know how to do.
That's a very Starfleet mentality, isn't it? I mean, Starfleet seems to be a place of rampant workaholism. And I do wonder, would this story have worked a little better maybe if Fairhaven had been completely destroyed? Because, would Janeway have maybe come to the realization of how real this relationship was for her, only to lose it? But then she could lose somebody just as easily who's organic in the same kind of fashion, showing maybe does that aspect of things matter so much? And would losing Michael increase a desire to have a real romantic relationship in her life? And maybe had that been the case, maybe that would have opened the door for the character, and Janeway would have gotten something out of this. Because then we would have eventually figured out, what would that mean for her? What does it mean for her if she doesn't? And she just closes the door again and focuses solely on her duty and getting the ship home. And so what sort of sacrifice does that mean for her personally?
Just when I think that we haven't plumbed enough of the depths of Janeway's inner psyche, then we get that.
Was it really fair? Was it really that much of a haven? Let's see what our hosts think.
All right, we've made it to the end of our holodeck adventure here, Fairhaven.
Oh boy!
And as we do on Mission Log, we get to summarize. We get to take a step back and just ask, well, does the episode hold up? And maybe more importantly, what did we learn? Because I don't know if you know this, Shar, but every now and then an episode of Star Trek comes along and maybe it doesn't fire on all cylinders. Maybe it doesn't hit quite right, but there's still something to take away from it. It happens every now and then. Or maybe the opposite happens. Maybe it's a great episode and you just go like, I didn't really get anything from it, but I sure had fun. So I'm going to ask you about Fairhaven here. What do we feel about this episode holding up?
Well, I want to preface everything I'm about to say with the fact that I know that there are people who enjoy this episode because it is a fun romp on the holodeck and it's an Irish village, and that's cool. Shout out to my To the Journey co-host Tristan Riddell, whom he and I have famously argued about this episode before on that podcast. He loves the episode, I do not. He doesn't see things my way, I don't see it his, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I think he enjoys just seeing the crew enjoying themselves and having some downtime for a change. And I do get that. Not every story has to be high stakes and life-threatening. And so that aspect of it is fun. However, when it comes to lighthearted holodeck romps, dripping in cheese, give me Captain Proton over this program any day. Captain Proton is far more engaging, has greater story potential. I mean, there's a reason why we revisited it several times. And look, it engages the eye through black and white better than Fairhaven does in color. Thanks to its ornate costumes, its goofy props, it's fun to look at. It's interesting to look at. This, I'm sorry, not as much for me, John. I know you're a fan of the aesthetic, but I have no desire to revisit Fairhaven, even if and when Tom rebuilds the Holo program. So that's a no for me there. I do love what this episode tries to do, which is to let Janeway have a romance that doesn't raise any eyebrows. That is, until she deletes the wife. That does make me raise my eyebrow. Like, lady, you did yourself in when you said those three. Like, that should have been her moment of clarity. Like, I went too far, and she didn't.
Interesting.
So,
yeah.
Look, I appreciate this episode acknowledging head on that Janeway has sacrificed much of her personal life for getting her crew home.
Yeah.
That includes personal happiness in a relationship. She has not had one, really, since they've been stranded. So she hasn't had much of a chance for romance or companionship, potentially having a long-term partner, no family prospects, and what a lonely path all of that must be for someone who has expressed some longing for those things throughout the show. So I don't know if leaving the door open on this romance was the right decision, because that leaves us as the viewer unclear of what, if anything, Janeway gets from the episode, and therefore I'm not sure how or if she's going to grow from this experience. So the story on its own does not offer those answers, and so for that reason I say no, the episode does not hold up. How about you?
Wow, really well said.
Thanks.
Yeah, there's just so much here that I feel like they're trying to do, but they're trying to do it with this fun, lighthearted romp on the holodeck. And sometimes those episodes are successful. Sometimes you can do that and you go, well, yeah, it just looks like a weird adventure, and yeah, we're just getting our characters out of their normal costumes for a while, but we're actually doing something that is either super entertaining because it's just a fun situational story, or we're doing something that is a bit more introspective with the characters. They're trying to bite off all of that here. But does it succeed? Well, let me tell you what I like. Something that I do like, it's almost redundant to say it whenever we do. Performances are just really good. I mean, this is a show that is firing on all cylinders. We know that just because the production has been doing this for 6+ years, you know? So when you single out Kate and you single out Fenton McKeon, what I really like about him is that he underplays his role, and it just grounds him really nicely. Even when you make the changes in who he is, from the kind of rough and tumble, uneducated barkeep to this, you know, guy with the heart of a poet, all of that works well because he's not overdoing it. He just seems like a guy.
Yeah.
And I think you need that here in order to sell this story about Janeway. I like a frivolous episode where characters get to have fun. You can't do that all the time on Star Trek, but every now and then you've just got to sort of take a deep breath and go like, oh, okay. Yeah,
right, let's relax.
Let's let our characters have a bit. Let's stop saving the galaxy for a minute, all right? I do like getting a setting that we haven't seen before. The promise of the holodeck is you can go anywhere at any time. And we don't get a whole lot of that. So, and I love Captain Proton too, but I don't want to see too much Captain Proton.
Okay.
I really like Sandrine's.
I did too.
I don't want to get too much of Sandrine's, but man, if we could have walked out the door and seen Paris, that would have been great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and honestly,
bring...
Sandrine seemed cozy, just to come down and have a drink. And unfortunately, this is something that I did not put into the earlier discussion, but both have a little bit of sexism going on. Like, we had the pool shark guy who had sexist comments of Sandrine's, and then we have the comment of, oh, you're just a little lady, you can't do the arm wrestle.
Yep, right.
Do we really have to put it that way?
Yeah. I figured that would be worked in at some level.
Tardy, but there.
Yeah. And I do feel like, there's some genuine chemistry here for the captain. Again, I think those scenes are played pretty well. And there's the beginning of exploring these really interesting ideas about human emotion and human reaction to things that can fool you, or that you allow yourself to be fooled in this emotional context. Like I said, you kind of understand when you go into a movie that if you laugh, you cry, whatever, the reaction is real, but you know that after 90 minutes to 2 hours, you get up and you walk out the door. Yeah. And you kind of leave that behind. But we allow ourselves to do that. But the question is, does all of that come together for this episode? Either as just a fun bit of escapism so we can overlook its flaws, or is it provocative enough that we can't help but remember it for all of its ideas? And it's a swing and a miss. So I really respect this idea of trying to give Janeway a bit more emotional depth. There is so much that is unresolved, like you said, and really could be explored about the emotional toll this has taken on her without going the route of just what I hated, which is coming back and Janeway's locked herself in her room for 3 months and then just decides to pick up a phaser and go fight the bad guys again.
We did that, did we not?
We did that, and it just felt very unsatisfying because it didn't feel emotionally real. It didn't feel earned.
It's not how you recover from 3 months of depression.
No. But I don't feel like they really accomplished that here. I feel like we got a taste of an idea, and we got a taste of an idea about emotion. We got a taste of an idea about this, what I think is a much more relevant question now about our interaction with artificial intelligence, or as we have said on Mission Log for many years, manufactured intelligence, because it's not necessarily artificial. It just is. Yeah. Whether it's programmed or naturally occurring biological intelligence. So does that bring us to a moral or a meaning or a message? I think Janeway has something to reflect upon here, which is you can try, but you probably can't program the perfect partner. And even if you could, would you want to?
Right?
Is that satisfying? Is that really what you want? Because then you miss the opportunity for discovery and surprise and mutual growth. So she's got something to think about here, but we all get to think about that too. Now, let's go back to that conversation that she had with the doctor. Photons and force fields, flesh and blood, it's all the same as long as your feelings are real. He makes a joke, you laugh. He says something that makes you think. Does it matter how his molecules are aligned? Well, maybe in the most generous interpretation of that, we get to look at Star Trek's overall respect for life in all of its many forms. It might be flesh and blood based, carbon based, it might be silicon based, it might be something else. But we have to stop ourselves from immediately judging it and saying it's not worthy of the kind of respect that we give to life. Janeway has been on this path. She has been on this path in her own ship with her own EMH, trying to figure that out. So it's very important that he's the one who gets to say that to her. And that it gets backed up by her XO, by Chakotay. Yeah. So I don't think we come to a conclusion there. But I think it's the start of this provocative question that Star Trek asks of us every now and then, which I like to sum up as asking, does it matter? Does it matter if we can point to a life form and say, well, they're made out of something different? Well, they got programmed that way. If your emotional reaction is the same as it would be for a naturally occurring biological entity, does it matter in the end? I like that an episode can leave us with that. How about you, Char?
You got a lot of the same points that I do, sir.
Okay.
We're right on the money here.
I want to hear your interpretation. All right.
Yeah, look, I think Janeway proves in this episode that there is no such thing as a perfect romance, even with a partner programmed to be perfect for you. That's still backfired in a way. And so, nope, cannot be done. And, the thought occurred to me also, sometimes the person you fall in love with isn't real. The movie Her comes to mind.
I had that in my notes earlier. I just didn't get to it. Yeah, I love that you brought it up.
Yeah, also, so does catfishing. Where people create fake personalities or profiles online and try to, get people to send them money and stuff like that. It's a scam.
Right.
But for the people that fall for that sort of thing, they can genuinely fall for that person. Their feelings are real, but they're in love with the idea of someone, not a real person. And maybe that's another way of interpreting what Janeway struggles with here in her own mind, the way she's seeing it because of the hard disconnect. Like, she really has a hard time letting go or indulging in her fantasy. If she were just on board with it, like, this guy's my boy toy. This is how I'm going to get off every now and then and meet some needs.
I guess she's entitled to it. That's fine.
Yeah, but the fact that she fell in love with him changed everything. And so it's way more than that for her. And again, I ask, was she in love with being in love? Well, we don't know because TBD.
Well, I love it, Char, that we ended up on an episode where maybe we both feel like the episode doesn't hold up, but it sure gave us something to talk about and some provocative ideas, perhaps, to be followed up on one day. Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com, and for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, blink of an eye.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shadwell, Paul Shadwell, and David Takechi. At least it wasn't an entire episode set in Club Bromed. If anyone ever runs that program again, there's probably still a giant virus in there. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.